As part of finals fever, we're taking the passion approach. There's a lot of passion floating around St Kilda over the last couple of weeks in the build-up to this first final against the Western Bulldogs, our first final since 2011. And anyone that's ever been to the Victory Room or anyone that's ever jumped on social media or followed St Kilda through any platform will be well aware of Bruce Eva's love of the club. A football caller and radio personality and function host and MC and you name it, he's done it, and a passionate Sainter. Beaver, nice to have you with us. And as we start things off, you mentioned on Twitter that you wanted to borrow a submarine and if you could find somebody to park it for you in Brisbane. Did you have any luck?
No, Darren. Firstly, thanks for having us. Thanks for having us, guys. And no luck with the submarine, unfortunately. So I still don't know whether there is a docking station in the Brisbane River. A few people got in touch with me and actually suggested that a submarine might be around about the $80 million mark if we wanted to buy one. So I think we probably need to eradicate the club's debt before we get to hiring or purchasing a submarine. So down here in Melbourne with the rest of us, and we'll be watching on intently on Saturday.
So basically, as Darren's just gone over all the background you've had and everything you've done and been in and out of media in this part and that part, and where did it all start for you? How did you become involved in the media? Who gave you your opportunity to get into all this?
Yeah, Aaron, I was very lucky. I got a cadetship on the old Herald newspaper straight out of school. Back then, the Herald and the Sun were two separate papers, so I actually got a cadetship coming out of what was then your HSC at the end of 1985. My first day actually on the Herald was the day the first space shuttle blew up. So it was a very, very big news day, and it happened in perfect Herald time, as they used to say, because it happened at about 4 o'clock in the morning, Australian summertime. So it was. I'd worked out pretty early at school that I wasn't going to be able to play sport at the highest level, but I was just obsessed with sport. And a few friends, a next door neighbour was a leading photographer on the Sun newspaper, a bloke called Craig Borrow. And then in year 11 at school, I was lucky enough to go to Haileybury, and Stephen Phillips, an old boy, came out and gave a talk on what was a normal day at World of Sport on the classic Sunday morning show. And that was the seal the deal for me in terms of wanting to get involved in the sports media. And I was told I always had the gift of the gab, and I quite liked to write. So I was lucky enough to get through the long process of getting a cadetship on the Herald and Weekly Times, and was my first job was on the Herald.
Yeah, Beaver, there's a few passionate Saints fans in the media. You're obviously one of the more vocal of the lot. But how did your love for the footy club come about?
Yeah, I have to blame my dear departed dad for that. Dad was St Kilda, and Mum was Melbourne. Although Mum's changed to St Kilda in recent years. Dad's been gone 20 years now. He passed away a few weeks before the Sydney Olympics. He was only 64, but he was the deal that Mum and Dad had come to when they got married was any boys they have will barrack for St Kilda after Dad, and any girls will follow Melbourne after Mum. My two older sisters are both Melbourne supporters, and ironically, they actually got married, Mum and Dad, on the day that we broke our longest ever finals drought, the 1961 first semi-final against Footscray. So the Saints hadn't been in the final since 1939, and Dad was 25 when he got married, but he still didn't get to see the Saints in a final for another couple of years after that. I never asked him as to why he barracked for St Kilda. All of our family, all the Evas are from Ballarat, which has obviously got a huge St Kilda connection, but back when Dad started following the Saints, there wasn't the country zoning then, and his dad, my grandfather, was a Bulldogs or a Footscray supporter. They moved down to Bentley during the Second World War. My grandfather tried to enlist, but was was knocked back because he had a heart murmur. So it wasn't even then the Bentley-Moorabbin connection, because that was years before we moved from the junction to Linton Street. So I never, if he did tell me, I forgot. But that's a long story of telling you how I came to barrack for the Saints. I didn't have any choice. Being my father's son, I was red, white, and black from the moment I entered this world.
Not to go off on a tangent, but I can see many similarities there, even in the start you had with the Challenger disaster in 1986. My first day on SEN was Black Saturday, and obviously we turned into a news service that day rather than a sports service. And similar with the background, although my grandfather used to sell records at the Junction Oval in the late 1930s after having the family settled in St Kilda. So followed obviously through the generations and had to stay there. He was at the 66 grand final, which is obviously something I'm very envious of. But I guess your early heroes growing up, obviously thinking of the era and those sort of stuff, some early favourite players for you?
Well, Darren, good question. We can probably start that answer by going through my order of jumper numbers. Although even now, as I'm 52 now, I get a little confused. I think I started with 3. I went 3, 7, 35. 3, 7, 35, 2, and 5. So that was Ross Smith, Stuart Trott, Paul Callery, Gary Sidebottom, and then Joffa Cunningham, of course. And it's not often that one of your childhood heroes becomes one of your best mates, but Joffa's he's godfather to my son Brady, and one of my best mates. But the early day, I first got taken to Moorabbin in '75 as a 7-year-old by Dad. We'd been to a few St Kilda games in the previous couple of years, either the MCG or VFL Park. We only lived about 5 to 10 minutes from VFL Park. Grew up just next to the Sandown Park Racecourse. Went to Sandown Park Primary, so Waverley was our closest ground. So so Moorabbin in '75 was the first time I went to the centre of the universe, the hallowed turf. And but even back then, like Barry Breen, Cowboy. I mean, I just loved Cowboy. And then of course when the trio of blondes came along in Barker, Burns, and Cunningham. I mean, it was pretty much regulation in terms of who my heroes were. That for most Saints fans that sort of grew up throughout the 70s and 80s.
So you mentioned going to Moorabbin there a bit. Now, obviously, we know there's a few other famous Saints fans and that sort of stuff, and a couple of photos of yourself have popped up over time at games there and that sort of thing. Who are some of the other names that we would know that you have either had a bit good chat with at the game before they've all become like big names, I guess? But who are some of the ones that you knew before then?
Oh, so Aaron, you're talking about supporters, other supporters. Yeah. Well, I guess I retained my reserve seat in the grandstand at Moorabbin right until the end in 1992. Our early years of our reserve seats were sort of sandwiched between the visiting club, injured players, reserve players and officials, and the past players, the St Kilda past players, and then moved around to the bay in front of ironically, in front of the press box. And then Dad sort of stopped going from about 86, just for a couple of years there. So then my seats in the stand very close to the Lockett family. So I've always been fairly close. In fact, I was only talking to Di, Plugger's sister. We had about a half-hour chat on the phone about a month ago. So very sat pretty close to Mrs. Lockett and Di and Carol and Neil when he came down. And then as I got to sort of my late teens and started going with groups of mates and stuff like that, we used to stand I retained my reserve seat, but we'd stand behind the goals, behind the cheer squad at the Nepean Highway end. And there was probably 3 or 4 groups of us. Our big group, we stood very close to Matthew Hardy's group, and Matty and I have been mates probably from those days, from the late 80s, similar age, and of course famous as a comedian and the author of Saturday Afternoon Fever and the like. Scotty Goodings, who's pretty well known as a TV critic, and has written a couple of St Kilda fanzines and stuff like that. His group were just near us as well. So they were sort of the main three groups that sort of stood behind the goals. I mean, God, we could have anything of 20 or 30 of us standing together, and then Matty's group was pretty big, and the same with Scott's. And then you tend to find games like at the MCG and Waverley, a lot of our groups would amalgamate, and a couple of those games at the MCG in the early 90s, when the Great Southern Stand first opened, we used to stand at M15, which we dubbed MI5, and sometimes there'd be sort of over 100 of us standing together that were all loosely connected and had the common bond of the red, white and black.
Mate, you mentioned your age earlier. You said you're 52, so that means you would have just missed out on that famous day in '66. Do you have a moment that sticks out to you as your favourite moment? Obviously, we've seen a lot of heartbreak. There's been a lot of bad moments, but is there one moment that kind of tops it for you in your 52 years?
Another good question, Nick. Look, obviously, the '97 preliminary final. Knowing that we were going to see, people our age, we're going to see the Saints in a grand final for the first time, because even 1971, I was only 3. I think one of my first memories of St Kilda was a game against South Melbourne at VFL Park in '74 when I just turned 6. So obviously can't remember 71 or 70. I was actually taken to the '73 first semi against Richmond with my dad, and his best mate was a Richmond supporter. And all I can remember, I was 5, all I can remember is we sat near the siren and the MCC members, and I can remember Richmond running out. So until the '91 elimination final against Geelong, I really, really couldn't say that I'd been to see St Kilda in a final. So look, there's a host of, even that '91, even though we lost. So I mean, once again, the system conspired against us that year, didn't it? But just to the '92 elimination final against Collingwood, the feeling at the final siren. But yeah, the prelims, obviously winning the prelims, and '97 and '09 and 10. I mean, the joy when Rui socked that goal through. We were standing at the other end, actually. We were at the city end when Rui socked the goal through in the last quarter of the '09 prelim. But even the '96 night grand final. A lot of people that aren't involved with St Kilda, they laugh at, talking about a pre-season premiership, but just the scenes at Waverley that night, you guys would, recall them. It was just simply amazing. Grown men climbing goalposts. it was mad to beat the reigning day premiers by 10 goals as well in front of a full house. But once again, I know it's a long answer. There's one, though, that I'll go back, a home and away game that we didn't even win in 1985. So we were the reigning Wooden Spooners and Essendon the reigning premiers. And we played the Bombers mid-season at Moorabbin. And they led by about 45 points at three-quarter time. So it's just going to be a regulation side for the powerhouse unit of the time. They kicked the first goal of the last quarter, so they were 51 points up. And then between the 3-minute mark and the 14-minute mark of the last quarter, we kicked 8 straight to nothing to get within 3 points. And we were kicking to the grandstand end as well, the Nepean Highway end. And the place, it was just, there was about, I think it was in the low 20s, the crowd that day, but the place was absolutely rocking. In the last couple of goals, I mean, the St Kilda chant from the grandstand and that hadn't even died. People were tumbling over seats, and I'm pretty sure it was David Grant who kicked the final goal of the 8 in a row. Again, it was just straight out of the centre, and it was amazing. And it felt like the stand was going to topple over when that goal was kicked to put us within 3 points. It was just an 11-minute period of the most amazing football you've ever seen. Essendon steadied and won by 3 or 4 goals, but it was it's a memory which I'll take to my grave.
And I think that's a lot about St Kilda. We have a lot of those moments. Unfortunately, we obviously haven't lifted a cup and celebrated that collectively as fans. But I think for all of the pain and suffering, if you will, and for all of the frustration, we all have those memories, and to a lesser extent, I thought one of them was last week. I mean, it was a 9-year drought, not an 18-year drought or a 22-year drought like we've had in the past, but there was something significant about that, and I think the outpouring of emotion from a lot of people thinking, like, geez, this has been such a tough road since we lost an elimination final to Sydney in 2011, and that whole 2011 season was tough given we weren't really in contention based on what happened the year before. If you were to sort of sum up the journey being a Saints fan, what is it about the place that does make it so special?
Yeah, well, another good question, Daz. I mean, we often say, you know, if you ain't a Saint, you ain't. And really, people that don't follow the club, they really don't get it, because they look on us as, you know, why do you enjoy so much pain and suffering and misery? But you wear it like a badge of honour. Not the pain and suffering and misery, but just the club itself. It's always been hard to really put a finger on the rare type of emotion and passion that the club creates amongst its supporter base. And even a lot of past players have said to me over the years, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, that, you know, it hasn't been until after they've finished playing and then become supporters like us that they actually then really get it about the, you know, the emotion that sort of surrounds and occasionally overwhelms the footy club. And it's a credit to St Kilda people as to how big a supporter base we still have, given that, you know, unfortunately, statistically, we are, you know, the least successful club in history. So you're right. You know, it was. I'll say at the same time, it was with mixed emotions watching that game. Well, I actually had to call it for 3AW. I had to call our last two games, the Eagles game and the Giants game. I was in a much better mood in the Giants game, I can assure you of that. But yeah, because and it's for selfish reasons. I mean, we just have to be so envious of our friends that are all in the, you know, Southeast Queensland supporters group, led by Murray and Bev Brown and that, because they're going to get to see our boys in the flesh on Saturday, and it's never quite the same. I don't know about you guys, but I really struggle watching us on TV. I think that you just can't replicate that, you know, the passion that you get from being at the ground and roaring them home with fellow like-minded Saints. But it's going to be terrific to see them back in the big time this Saturday.
Yeah, I think my wife's looking forward to me going back to the games too. So
yeah, I'm hearing you, Aaron. I'm hearing you.
Put you on the spot here. So you get given the opportunity to tell a story about the club. I'm going to give you the option of an hour of primetime TV, an hour of radio, a newspaper article, or a book. Where are you going to tell your story? Where would be the one that you go, that's where I want it?
Well, as you can probably see when this goes up on video, I've got a good head for radio. Pardon me. I've got a good head for radio, but probably a book, because I've often thought, and I very much admired Matt Hardy's book about Saturday Afternoon Fever. I reckon I've got enough material to probably write 2 or 3 St Kilda books. And if Jeff Joseph is watching this or listening to this, Trevor Barker's former manager, I'm currently trying to set a world record, and I say that with tongue in cheek. I've started on Trevor Barker's biography many years ago, and it has been the slowest moving piece of literature, I think, in the history of the modern world. So that's a bit of a sore point with myself as well, because I just need to get cracking on it. But I'd love to write a St Kilda book on the, you know, sort of the cultural aspect of our club. I mean, you could write a book, I've thought over the year, you could write just a book just on Moorabbin. I mean, just the amazing venue that Moorabbin has been, and not just with the footy club. A lot of people forget it was the training venue for World Series cricket before World Series cricket started, because they couldn't get venues. They used to have professional running there. There was rock concerts there. We then had baseball there. Like Dave Nielsen, one of our greatest ever baseballers in this country. I was playing cricket for Moorabbin in the lower 11s when the baseball team moved in the Thursday nights with the under lights and stuff like that. So, yeah, again, probably a long-winded answer, but I'd probably, Aaron, have to say a book, given there's that much material to write about.
I reckon we could all go with another St Kilda book. I know Matt Hardy's book, that Saturday Afternoon Fever that you referenced, is my all-time favourite book. I think it resonates with any footy fan, not just St Kilda supporters, but any footy fan that kind of grew up in that period, suburban Melbourne sort of stuff. But
he left so many great stories out as well, Nick.
Oh, it's amazing! It's amazing. I still love the story of the girlfriend with the number one Trevor Barker on her back, the long blonde hair and the number one. It's an incredible story. But if you've done a lot of work with the club, and as Parko said earlier in your intro, host functions and things like that, is there a player or someone involved in the club where you've just been in awe? I mean, despite everything that you've been through, despite everything that you've seen and experienced yourself as a supporter in the media, is there someone at the club that you've kind of just found yourself speechless?
Yeah, probably. Even, I mean, not that we get to see him very often, but there's still something about being in Plugger's presence that has, you're not exactly quaking in your boots, but he's just got such a presence about him. And as I said earlier, it's probably ironic given, I've got to know the rest of his family so well over the last, 30 odd years. So, I mean, Plugger still he's still the greatest player that I've ever seen. You could probably say, go along again through different eras, Nick. As I said earlier, it's not often your main childhood hero becomes a very close friend. So, the love I have for Joffa Cunningham as a close personal friend is immense. And then probably the guy, I mean, the guys that played in the 97 grand final, they were the guys I sort of, when I say grew up with, I mean, at the time, Jason Daniels is my best mate, and him and I were sharing a house together in 97. So I saw the highs and lows of that season up close and personal, being Jack's housemate. And because I was sort of around the same age as all of those guys, a lot of them still make the joke that I was sort of like their personal PR agents. A lot of those guys, the bulk of the stories written on them in their careers were usually had the byline by Bruce Eva. So very close to all of those blokes. And then in the era that culminated in the grand finals in 2009, 2010, again, very close to a lot of those guys. My admiration for Stephen Milne in terms of his mental strength and what he put up with and coped with and came out the other side, and such a great family man. And he is just a wonderful human being. And my friendship with Milne is something I hold very dear. And then also, like, someone like Cozzy, who Cozzy's had a few battles in recent times. So, and then it's been great to see blokes like Joey and Rui go into the media and come to the other side, come to the dark side, if you like. So there's been so few St Kilda players that I haven't taken a shine to. So it is hard to just narrow it down to one. And then you think back, I guess the end of that answer is how many great players, both as footballers and as people, that we've seen in the last 50 odd years, and they haven't got to taste premiership success. And that, I think that makes us all a little bit sad.
Better just win the next 4 games and settle it now. But it's interesting as we look at the final one from me, and obviously we could go on for a long time. I guess your assessment of the season, it's been a roller coaster, but one in which we've been in the top 6 for pretty much the entirety of the season. It took us till the last round to get there. How you're feeling, A, about the year, B, about the clash with the Bulldogs on Saturday, and C, about the immediate future?
Yeah, I've still got the sticky note in front of me when we collapsed against Freo. We're 3-3, and so we obviously had 11 games to go, and I drew two columns to make 3 compartments, and there was the 5 gimmies. I thought from there, the 3 losses that we were more than likely going to have, and the 3 in dispute. Well, we won 4 out of the 5 gimmies. We won 2 out of the 3 that I had, in dispute, could go either way, and we won 1 out of the 3 that I thought were going to be losses. The one win being the Port Adelaide win. So, I think the transformation in the club this year, in all aspects of it, has been fantastic. And you can only imagine what it's going to be like once we get back into our heartland and playing back in Melbourne again. Just think back the momentum that we had on the back of the Hawthorn and Collingwood victories in the pre-season. That night at Moorabbin, hosted the function that night in the junction room. Was just the buzz around the place that night to have footy back at Moorabbin, and all the momentum we went into the season with, the way the girls had performed in their first season as well, and all the recruits and it was just fantastic. And then I think we should be so proud of the way we bounced back from that, first disappointing loss to North Melbourne, and then the way the season just was closed down for 10 or 11 weeks. So to regather themselves and then to overcome so many hurdles, as every club has had to do, and to do it brilliantly off field as well. I think we should take great pride in the fact that there hasn't been a squeak out of our hub as far as any misbehaviour or shenanigans or anything. So I think it's been whatever happens this Saturday and over the next, what we hope is 4 weeks, I think it has just been a terrific foundation to what's going to be a really exciting, next 5 to 7 years. And you look at the age demographic of the side as well. Just look at our back line. I mean, set Jake aside, but, Callum Wilkie and Dougal Howard, they're a couple of weeks apart in their birthdays. They're both 24. And then you think, we'll lose Hunter Clark into the midfield. He won't be a halfback for too much longer, but you look at Koff and Benny Patton and Benny Long. I mean, the age of the back line, we're just so young down there. So, I think we're in for a really exciting ride. Pardon the old the old line from 20 years ago, but for the next 5 to 7 years, I reckon should be terrific.
I saw a little post today about the 1991 Batmobile from the grand final, basically saying how much would you pay for it? Is there something that you'd like, maybe something obscure that you go, I'd love to go back in time and get my hands on that? Is there something that you can recall and go, that would be really nice piece of something to have? Yeah,
Aaron, there's a few again. In fact, I know a few of the blokes that have bought the Batmobile, but that's a story. Yeah, Shannon Gill, that's a story for another time. I do know, I haven't seen him for a long time. I know the guy who's got, I think it's in his parents' backyard, and I think it's set in concrete, the point post that was snapped off in Joffa's 200th game when Plugger slung Peter Dacos into the point post, which was sort of in the grandstand forward pocket at the Nepean Highway end. I know the guy, he's a very close friend of mine, who pinched the windsock before the last game at Moorabbin, or a couple of weeks before the last game at Moorabbin. That unfortunately disintegrated over the years. It wasn't in really good nick anyway. I've got it's actually at a mate's place. I've got to wait till I do a bit of landscaping in the back garden here here at my place. But I have got was lucky enough to obtain a set of turnstiles from Moorabbin as everything was being demolished, so that'll take pride of place. But the one I was really disappointed in, and this is just such a classic St Kilda story, I'm sure you may be aware of it, is that with the demolition of the ground, this is the way it was told to me, I think it was by Matt Finnis, it might have even been by, anyway, that's by the by, but with the loosening of the foundations, with the terraces coming down in the outer, and then all the earthworks that were going on, the scoreboard was still standing. And then my understanding is that there was one weekend. There was a heavy winds and that across the weekend, and the scoreboard actually blew over. And then when the company that was doing the demolition and removing all the stuff from the ground that couldn't be auctioned off, got there on the Monday, they thought that with it blown over and that it wouldn't want to be kept or any parts of it, and it was just bundled off and taken to wherever a lot of the stuff was gone. So I just would have loved, not necessarily the St Kilda thing, I would have loved something from the scoreboard. I would have loved something, and I'd always said about grabbing my seat, giving out a seat on the end of the aisle in the grandstand. We know Spud and Lowy went down and did that, but I'll have to make do with a turnstile.
Yeah, I think we've all got a piece of
seat.
seat.
I've got a couple of slots of the seats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well played.
Beaver, one more from me, mate. But we heard Rui this week in that hype video released by the club ask, why not us? What are you looking forward to seeing from us on Saturday afternoon, aside from a win, obviously?
Yeah, well, look, I think it annoys me sometimes the way the Dogs get talked up as being this really sexy side, and even you can individualise a bit and talk about all the hoopla that always seems to be about Tim English and Rowan Marshall seems to get forgotten. Well, as we know, Rowan and Paddy monstered Tim English back in round 2. Oh, look, the Dogs are playing good footy. They were this time last year as well, and got smashed by the Giants in week 1. I'm not saying we're going to smash them, but we've beaten them comfortably the last twice we've played them. I think they've got plenty of things to worry about with what we can dish up in terms of how heavily we can score, how quick we can move the footy. Their midfield is flying. There's no doubt about that. But I reckon we match up well with them down back. It looks like they're going to have a couple of blokes go in, not under an injury cloud, but Norton looks like he's going to play wearing a helmet to protect the cheekbone, and Mitch Wallace, they still don't seem to be completely convinced that his shoulder's going to be 100%. So I just want us to be bold. I want us to play that, and I thought against the Giants that we returned to some of the footy that we sort of played in the first 12 rounds. So it's going to be a different feel. I'm not sure how many will actually be at the game, whether it'll be 10,000, 15,000. You hope the Saints supporters, they've made a lot of noise in the last few weeks at the Gabba. So if we can be bold, if we kick straight, there was a couple of instances in the last few weeks where a bit of that inaccuracy crept back in. But just play with freedom, and we know they'll be hard at it, and we can hopefully get the result.
As we let you go, Beaver, I think I remember 6 years ago at the start of 2014 when the Saints were on their way to winning a wooden spoon. We were both travelling to Adelaide to call the game for our respective networks, and we were on the plane while St Kilda was playing. And when we landed in Adelaide, I think there was about 5 minutes to go, and we were a point in front. And I remember the two of us watching the last 5 minutes of that game on a phone as we hung on and beat the Giants. And the excitement around then when we were on our way to a spoon was enormous. So it's great to catch up with you now with the excitement of a final on our doorsteps. Obviously very different times, but the passion's always been there, and fingers crossed we take another step on Saturday. But thanks for sharing the journey with us.
Thanks, guys. Great to be on. Thanks for having us on, and love your passion as well. And let's all get behind the boys on Saturday, and hopefully we're blasting the song out loud and proud come about 7 o'clock Saturday night.
And we'll see you in the victory room next season when everything's normal.
Cheers, guys.